And you know, I don't think that I'm going to make any great impact or change the world, but for every offense there is a defense. You know, in war, it doesn't make any difference whether the Russians develop this or that strategic weapon. Within a year or two, we'll develop a defense against it, and it works the other way. We develop some defense to some weapon system, and then the Russians will come back with a more powerful or a different type of offensive weapon. You know, this thing of developing a strategy like the Fifth Amendment return, you know, and this is the Fifth Amendment return and it works forever, is poppycock. Because the IRS now has a defense to the Fifth Amendment return. And when I tell you what you do is you convert your check to silver, pretty soon they'll develop a defense to the silver issue. That's what they'll do. But what you need to do is to continually use your gray matter to stay a jump or two ahead of the IRS. It's just like a war. If you have income, you can reduce it drastically, and if you're working for wages, tips, first-time commissions, etc., they're not taxable anyway under the Eisner Doctrine and Bruchaber. And when we get into the income tax, we'll talk about that more directly. And I'll show you how to drop right out of the income tax system. But I'm not going to do that in this course of lessons. And a fellow called me the other day. I forgot where he was from. He was back east in some state, in Indiana or someplace. And he said, listen, I'm tired of this Mickey Mousing around. What I want you to do is get down and show me how to get out of the tax system, and to heck with all this baloney of law. I don't want to go into the courtroom. And I said, that's exactly why we're not going to tell you how to do it. Because most of the people that walk through the doors here at this school are tax evaders, not tax avoiders. They're tax protesters, and that's against the law, friends, and I'm not teaching people how to break the law. I don't believe in that. I think if you have income, you need to pay the income tax. If you don't have income, I don't think you should pay the income tax. It's just that simple. If you're subject to a statute, a law, or if you're subject to some kind of a process or regulation, then why don't you just shut up? You know, if you're in the alcohol business and you're in a bar or something like that, and the policeman comes in and he says, I want to look at your bar. I want to make sure that you're not selling beer to minors, or you're not breaking the rules and the regulations. I don't have any problem with that, because you're licensed and you're involved in a regulated enterprise. But to get back to the subject matter of this IRS thing, and this fellow writing me from the East, he wanted to get right down to the nitty-gritty, and that's exactly true. But, you know, that reminds me of the fellow who's about to get married. And what he does is he says, listen, I don't want to know anything about responsibility and homes and jobs. I just want to get right to the heart and core of what I want out of marriage, and that's sex. All I want, sex. See, and I don't care about childbirth and child rearing and school and all the rest of this baloney that goes with it. Well, most people their hot button, as we call it in sales, is the income tax. What they want is they want to engage in privilege, and they want all of the benefits that come with checking and credit cards and all of the glamour and the sophistication that goes with it, and they want none of the responsibility. They want the profit and the income, but they don't want to pay the income tax. And that's just about the way people are, or at least men are, when they're about, 16 to 25. All they care about is sex. But there's a whole lot more to marriage than just sex. And there's a whole lot more to the income tax and law and protecting yourself from Leavenworth or McNeil Island for willful failure to file than just give me the essential facts of the income tax issue. Because in addition to the income tax issue, there's misdemeanors and traffic tickets and licenses and contracts and status, and there's just a whole lot more to it than that. So we're going to save the income tax issue for a special subject. When you're knowledgeable and you're qualified to go into a courtroom and defend yourself against a traffic ticket or some other crime, then you'll be knowledgeable enough to go defend yourself against willful failure to file and income tax evasion and other major felonies that are attributable to this thing of income. There's 3,500 people back there in Flint, Michigan. You might have read about them over in the newspapers and on television. There's 3,500 tax strikers that work at General Motors. And I think that's probably the correct term. I think they're probably all tax strikers and tax evaders. They're probably 90% of them have checking accounts, credit cards, and all kinds of bank privileges. and they're in the process of converting their labor, which is not taxable, into income, which is taxable through the banks, and then they don't want to pay the income tax. They want free sex, but they don't want pregnant girlfriends. And it doesn't work that way. You know, you're either pregnant or you're not. There's, you know, the old saying, you're not half pregnant. Well, you're either in the tax system or you're out of it. You're not half in or half out. Well, I heard the other day that they prosecuted 4 of them, and they got 3 convictions. The IRS can go over there, and they'll always pick out the weakest people, and they'll prosecute the 4 weakest, not the 4 strongest. With few exceptions, they'll try to nail the leaders and the ringleaders. People like me, you know, they'll harass and harangue me. I like when they harass and harangue me, because while they're pestering me, they're not pestering you or somebody else. And, you know, I'm knowledgeable enough that I can take 2 or 3 of those tax lawyers off of practicing and stealing from the citizenry out there. And what I'm trying to do is to get hundreds and thousands of others of you out there knowledgeable enough, and so while they're chasing rabbits, they're not over here in the hen house. We want the foxes chasing rabbits, not our chickens. Okay, I want to read the balance of this to you. We're talking about clad coins now. No meaningful provision exists permitting, let alone mandating, the Treasury to exchange at any ratio clad coins for silver or gold coins. There is no mechanism for exchanging the two. That's why you should have your income. Don't have $50,000 a year in income. Have $5,000 a year in silver income, and then take the silver and pay the tax on the silver, but don't pay the tax with silver. In other words, you know, don't pay 1,000 silver dollars to the IRS for $5,000 worth of income. What you do is you pay them 1,000 Ike dollars for $5,000 worth of silver dollar income. Or in effect, rather than serving as mere auxiliaries to the nation's constitutional coinage, the clad coins have superseded it entirely. If this be constitutional, then the entire legal history of money in England and the colonies, the independent states, the Continental Congress, the United States from 1704 until 1965 is, as the bard wrote, quote, a tale told by an idiot full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. Can it be possible that for more than 250 years, English and American statesmen, including the celebrated framers of the Constitution itself, struggled to create and maintain a monetary system based upon silver and gold purely as the result of a collective delusion that common law and the Constitution demanded it? And can it be possible that only in the last 20 years have our politicians and functionaries correctly perceived that all those efforts were unnecessary, and that the men who personally experienced English common law and wrote the Constitution had deceived themselves about the powers of the governments under which they lived, and one of which they themselves created? But surely such questions are merely rhetorical, for the history of these matters is neither arcane, nor meaningless, nor irrelevant. Rather, it's open to every man's view, understandable to every man's reason, and pertinent to every man's interest, in a monetary system appropriate for a free and well-functioning economy. And not a jot of this history lends the least support to the notion that base metal coinage is or can be equivalent to, or ever was intended by any American statesman worthy of the appellation to take the place of the constitutional silver dollars and other properly regulated coinage of precious metals. Okay, and there's a little dialogue that this fellow put in. This book will come along when we do the income tax issue. We have an income tax lesson in the course here, but we have a special section on the income tax because, you know, it's easier to drop out of the income tax system than it is to fight the income tax system. Talking about these clad coins now just for a moment, another writer, a fellow who invented, as I understand it, I'm not too knowledgeable about this personally, but as I understand the story, he invented the machine that changes dollars into coins. When you go into the laundromat, you put a dollar bill in and you get quarters back or something like that. And there was a paragraph or a sentence, and it went like this, that when they change, and the government's going to do this in a year or two, as I understand it, from some of the newsletters, from some of these writers that claim to know. I personally don't know because I'm not a prophet. I used to think I was. In 1968, I made some prophecies, and all of my prophecies fell flat on their face. And so that's what determined for me that I wasn't a prophet. I think I looked in Deuteronomy 8, and if a prophet come to you and he tells you what's going to happen, and if it happens, you'll know he's a prophet sent from God, and if his prophecies don't come to pass, then you'll know he's not a prophet sent from God. So I just wanted to clear that up. Now, when you look at me, you know I'm not a prophet sent from God, because my prophecies never come to pass. So I don't make prophecies anymore. I don't know when the monetary system is going to collapse. My common sense just tells me that it is. And this fellow said, what you want to do, even if you don't have silver or gold coins, you should have clad coins. And the reason for that is that when the system is revamped, what they're going to do is they'll inflate the system until the money means nothing. And then they've got to come back, don't they? As they keep inflating, you know, today prices really haven't changed very much. Well, I can remember when I was a kid. In fact, prices today, by and large, are a lot less than when I was a kid. You used to go in when I was 11 years old, 1950, and you'd buy ham and eggs for breakfast, and it was $1 silver. Okay? Well, by comparison, ham and eggs today ought to be about 10 or 11 silver dollars by comparison, but it's not. You know, you go into a restaurant today, I think you can get ham and eggs for $4 or $5. But you see, the value of silver has gone way up. Well, some things have changed more greatly than others. You know, you can remember when you were buying computers. I remember the first computer I bought, one of these little desk models here. I think I paid $300 for it back in the 60s sometime. Today, those same computers that do more are, what, $50, $75, you know? Okay? So, values are always relevant. And all of the gold and silver in the world represents all of the goods and services in the world, no more, no less. That's all. And so today, I don't care how much gold and silver is available in the world, it represents all the gold and silver. I mean, it represents all the labor and all of the goods and services. No more and no less. So when they inflate the money, all they've done is, you know, you go in and you pay $10 for what you were paying $1 for 30 or 40 years ago. Well, when it gets too bad, like it did in Germany in the 30s, what they'll do is they'll bring it back down. So what is expected is that they'll issue blue currency and they'll compel you to bring your green currency in and exchange it 10 for 1. And when it's exchanged that way, it'll be a devaluation. You've got $1,000 in the bank. They'll give you $100 in blue money for $1,000 in green money. If that occurs, they won't be able to change all the coins, see, because of all the coinage mechanisms and all these vending machines. And it takes, I don't know, several years to recoin all those coins that are out. So if you've got the clad coins, they're going to go up in value by whatever the devaluation is. So assuming that it was 10 to 1, all of a sudden every quarter you've got will be worth 10 quarters. Now whether or not that'll come to pass or not, I can't predict. But this much I can predict. You can't lose anything by converting your greenbacks to coin, but you could stand to gain a whole lot. And this fellow down at Pocatello, you know, I think he's got a good idea, and I think that's what I'm going to start doing, is just dealing in coins. It's a little less convenient and it's a little heavier, but I'd like to just have the knowledge that when I go buy a pair of shoes that I own them and I've paid for them at law. That's kind of what I had in mind on that one. All right, now that should cover the clad versus the silver. We'd recommend for you, and this is especially important now when you get in on the courtroom floor, if you're going to argue money, you need to argue it correctly. And this information that you're getting on clad coins isn't anything that's new or unique. I didn't invent it. You know, this isn't 1 Gordon 14:4. I'm not even smart enough to come up with that. But law doesn't change. Law is the same today, yesterday, and I would assume tomorrow. Okay? But we know it was the same yesterday and today. It's the legislature that we don't know what they're going to do. They change with every wind of doctrine. And for that reason, you can never depend on the law that the legislature is going to pass. You know, they're always going to pass laws that are going to take more taxes, and then they'll lower the taxes, and they constantly keep us deceived. The way I word it is this, that they tell us the truth 25% of the time, they lie to us 75% of the time, and keep us confused 100% of the time. So I can't tell you how it's going to come out in the next 5 or 10 years, but if you've got a lot of money, I think your common sense would tell you, get rid of it. And if you're working for wages, and if you owe taxes, and if you have problems along the tax line, convert it to silver and just continue to pay. And then when you get it on the courtroom floor, there's an argument that I've talked to 2 or 3 lawyers that they're willing, and these are lawyers, by the way, that I learned about this money conversion from silver to clad coins, is what they're going to argue on the courtroom floor. And that's a novel new argument. I don't think it's ever been argued, and I'm not sure the IRS is prepared to take that one on at this time. All right, now I want to talk to you about the next subject here in Lesson 15. Let's take a look at obligations. I'll give you a definition here of what an obligation is and how the obligation works upon you. I'm looking at Bovier's 1914 dictionary here under the term obligation. It starts off, a tie which binds us to pay or do something agreeably to the laws and customs of the country in which the obligation is made. The relation which exists between 2 persons of whom one has a private and peculiar right, that is not a mere public or official right, or a right incidental to ownership or a family relation. And it's to control the other's action by calling upon him to do or forbear some particular thing. Now, this word obligation in legal parlance then is going to be very important to you, because you see the driver's license compels you to an obligation to specific performance, as does your beer licenses and your marriage licenses and etc. So if you don't want to be obligated to specific performance, then you're going to have to know and understand what specific performance you want to perform and which specific performance you don't. Now, all of us over our lifetimes have made all kinds of contracts, and we've obligated ourselves to a number of things, including buying property and lands and mortgages and automobiles, etc. But an interesting thing just happened this morning. A fellow came in and he said that the finance company was going to take his car, and I said, oh, and he said, well, yeah, they want me to buy insurance for it, and I'm not going to buy insurance. Oh, I see. Well, what does the contract call for? Well, the contract says I have to be licensed and registered and buy insurance, but I don't like that anymore. Why, you've been telling me that insurance is a rip-off and a scam, and yeah, that's true, but you see, you've already signed the contract. Well, I'll just let them take the car back. Well, you better take a look at that contract again, because you know sometimes when they take the car back, they'll still make you pay for the car. You're still responsible for it. Maybe what you better do is sell the car. Well, maybe I don't have enough equity in it to sell the car. Well, you know, those are some of the problems that people get into through ignorance. That's where they're cunningly coerced into waiving their rights due to ignorance and law, but they're also cunningly coerced into signing contracts and making obligations to which they later become sorry. You know, if you can get yourself to the position where you're at 0-0, that is, you don't owe anybody anything, but you don't owe anybody anything, you'd be about in the upper 90 percentile. And that's fact. You see, almost everybody in the United States has moved from status to contract. I don't have any credit, thank God. I used to have a lot of credit. You know, there was a time I could go in and sign my name and get $20,000 or $30,000 in obligations that I would have to specifically perform to from the bank. And I'd go out and buy, sell, and trade, and then I would be specifically obligated to file income tax returns. And then I used to go out and buy apartment buildings and things like that. And then I would be specifically obligated to specific performance to my tenants. And one day I woke up and I said, I have to do this for my tenants, and I have to do that for the banks, and I have to do the other thing for the IRS, and I have to. Today I don't even have to get up in the morning. I don't owe the bank anything, and I don't have to specifically perform. I don't have any income, so I don't have to fill out any 1040 forms. I don't have any apartment houses, so I'm not a slave to my tenants. Instead, I rent, and my landlord is my slave, because when my water doesn't work or something breaks, I get on the phone and I say, hey, guess what? You've got a problem. And there's the difference between the master and the servant relationship. I'm the master, they're the servants. And you know, as long as you have toys, you will always have this sword of Damocles hanging over your head, and it's right back here, because if you don't specifically perform for the IRS, they'll come along and say, we're going to seize your bank account and lock your doors. We are going to take your toys away from you. Now, it's a tragedy that it has to be that way, but I don't know of very many free men. And this thing, of course, of owning property is a myth. There is no private property in the United States, and if you don't believe that, take a look at the word property here in Bouvier, or even look at property in blacks, and even black can tell you that property is the absolute right to do something with your property, including destroying it. But you can't destroy your house. That belongs to the bank, and you can't buy, sell, or trade or destroy your car, because if you don't license it, you know your government will take it away from you, and GMAC will take it away from you, and the IRS will threaten to take your toys away from you. So the truth of the matter is you're obligated to specific performance. And as long as you're under those obligations, you're not free, and you're a slave, and you don't like to be a slave. And so people, they come in here and they want George Gordon to be the new master, because you see, George Gordon is a better slave master than the government. They don't like Egypt. They don't like making bricks and going out and gathering their own straw, but at the same time they don't want to go out into the wilderness and be free and eat manna, because they like the leeks and the onions of Egypt, but they don't want to, see where your problem is. At some point in time you've got to make up your mind, decide, well, now what is it I want to do? Do I want to be obligated to the Egyptians, or did I want to be free and be obligated to myself and have to go out and make my own living and make my own way out in the wilderness? Farmers, I think, are probably the biggest group of welfarers that we have in our society. They used to be the one group that were the rugged individualists in our society, and that they were the leaders, and that they were the people who were the free men. Today, I don't know of any free farmers. I used to know a few of them when I was a youngster in the cattle business. When I was 15, 16 years old, I worked for some Portuguese and Italians who came over here from Italy, and they owned the land free and clear, and they owned their cows, and they owned their hay. Everything they bought, sold, and traded, they just owned it all, free and clear. They didn't owe anybody anything, and so everything that they possessed was wealth to them. Today, you show me a farmer that has any real wealth. He owes his land to production credit. He owes his cows to PCA. He owes everything, his farm equipment. We get calls in here, I'll bet you every day, there's some farmer that's calling us from someplace saying that he's about to be foreclosed on. Well, after all, there are some methodologies for going into the courtroom and stopping those foreclosures. I'll grant you this, those farmers have been defrauded. They were never given any substance. All they were given was checkbook entries and computer entries and ledger entries. They were never given any consideration for these contracts. They have been cunningly coerced into waiving their rights and signing contracts that obligates them then to specific performance. Listen to some of the rest of this. The obligation is the bond or chain with which the law, it's the bond or the chain. An obligation is a chain around your neck, of which the law joins persons or groups of persons in consequence of certain voluntary acts. PCA doesn't come out to your farm, point a gun at your head and say, sign here and mortgage your land. What they did was they're a little more cunning and coercive than that. They came out in the 1950s and said, gee, wouldn't you like to have a 3% loan over here? Wouldn't you like to get on welfare? Only they didn't call it welfare. They called it soil bank. Remember that soil bank? Put your land over here in the soil bank and sign this contract. As soon as you sign the contract, then you're obligated to specifically perform. And so now your government says, thou shalt not grow wheat. Thou shalt grow soybeans. And so your government then, by your voluntary act, becomes your Lord and Master. I believe that the government of the United States is the Lord and Master over 95% of you farmers out there. I don't think there's a free farmer out there. Now, you can regain your freedom. It isn't something that's lost forever, but you gave it away voluntarily. And remember, I think I read in an earlier lesson here, came out of this Dodd's book on agriculture, Congress can pass no laws regulating agriculture. A power that is not specifically delegated in the Constitution cannot be asserted by the government. But the way the government asserts welfare and soil banks and all of these government programs is that they sucker you in by giving you free money. Only they didn't give you any free money. What they did was they went out and they cranked up the printing press and gave you ledger entries, which were claims upon somebody else's wealth. Isn't this nifty? In other words, let's look at it this way. I'll take and I'll just, let's assume that this is a book full of money here, and I'll just tear them out. I just pull these out. And these are $5 bills. They're printed, right? I'll just take these out. Now I come to you, and you've got cows, and so I take them and I pass them off to you. I've given you nothing, which I've given you a chosen action. This is a claim, and I'm going to take a cow. Now I've got substance from you. You've got the chosen action that you then go take to your neighbor, and you defraud him out of his substance. The guy that printed this crap got whatever substance he traded this crap for free. When you take a Susan B. Anthony 3-cent dollar and you give it to somebody and you take $1 worth of jelly beans, you've got the jelly beans for 3 cents. Now do you see where it comes? Now, you're specifically obligated to perform on the contract. I gave you choses and actions, created an obligation at law, and now I'm compelling you to go out in the field and specifically perform and produce wheat for me. Now do you see why I'm sitting in the money houses? See these money changers? Things haven't changed from the time of Christ until now. These money changers were out stealing widows' houses and oppressing orphans 2,000 years ago. And today they're doing the same thing, and the lawyers are the chief among them. Only today we just hang different names and labels on it. I'll show you that as we go along, but as an example, Article 1, Section 10 absolutely prohibits titles of nobility. Do you know that the barons in the 1700s were the collectors of revenue for the king? And do you know we have collectors of revenue for the king today? We just call them county assessors now, that's all. We've just changed the name. The function, the office, the performance, and the theft are all the same. Nothing's changed. The rivers run into the oceans, said Solomon, and the oceans aren't filled. What was of old is today and shall be tomorrow. The sun rises in the east and sets in the west. And so some Pied Piper comes along, like our forefathers of old, and they said, we've got to have a king like all the rest of the nations around us. And Samuel said, well, this is a real slap in the face. God told him, you don't want a king. Let me tell you, kings tax people, and kings go to war, and kings kill your sons and draft them into the army. You don't want that. Oh, we got to have a king, and we've got to have a government and a nation like all the rest of the nations around us. That's, we rebelled against God. We didn't like him, so we kicked him out, and his last judge was Samuel. And today, what have we got? Military conscription and taxation. Our founding fathers paid 15% tax and threw George's tea in the harbor. Today we pay 50% tax, and we grovel before our masters. Those Anakims and Girgashites, remember this old story? This is a real classic. Here's these Israelites, they're children, 40 years after they've been in the desert. They get out here to the Jordan River, and they sent out some spies, remember? And there was 12 spies, and these spies went out into the land, and they came back, and 10 of them said, well, these people are like giants, and we're nothing but grasshoppers in their sight. And they've got cities walled up to heaven. And there was only 2 free men, or 2 men that thought they wanted to be free, and that was a couple guys named Joshua and Caleb, I think was their name. And they said, that's a bunch of poppycock. What we'll do is we'll go in there, and we'll figure out a way to kill them, And I think we can take the land away from them. These 2 guys, they were kind of optimistic, They were tired of being slaves, and they were tired of wandering around the desert, and they said, let's go in there and take that land. So, no, they didn't want to go in there. The majority of the people, they wanted to go back to Egypt where there were leeks and onions. They didn't want to, step out and let's be free men. Well, today we've got OSHA, EPA, and the IRS, and so we grovel before these Anakims and these Girgashites. And we cower in fear in the corners of our own homes and our own houses and businesses, wondering, well, what's the IRS going to do to us next? A free man doesn't go over in the corner and hide like a mouse. A free man is the cat, not the mouse. I don't run over in the corner and hide from my IRS agents. I go up to the IRS and I say, This is my office, and you work for me. Now sit down, let's talk law. And that's what you need to do. But in order to do that, you've got to protect all of your toys. So if you've got toys that are vulnerable to the Anakims and the Girgashites, you got a real problem. What you got to do is get rid of those toys. Once you get rid of the toys, well, what's the IRS going to do? They're going to levy against my bank account. Good luck. Some guy got a judgment against me for $7,000 the other day. That's like getting a judgment against Joe Louis for $5 million. I sit here and laugh at fools like that. Now that you got the judgment, what are you going to do with it? Now, going on. A bond, this is an obligation, is a bond containing a penalty. Penalty, with a condition annexed for the payment of money, performance of covenants, or the like, and which differs from a bill which is generally without a penalty or condition, though it may be obligatory. Now, do you see what you've got? You've got an obligation and a penalty clause in your contract. You farmers out there see now why it is that you're slaves to the Department of Agriculture. Then you're told that what we've got to do is to band into a union so that we can get the groupies, I call it. You know, let's form a group, and then let's go back to Washington and let's grovel before our masters and get them to lighten our load. My attitude like that is, why don't you throw the bastards out? Why grovel before your servants? But first of all, before you can be free, you've got to pay off your obligations at law. And if you've got obligations, you made them, now pay them. And quit groveling and demanding that the rest of us citizens out here pay off your obligations. This guy called me the other day, and he's got this real problem out here in Kansas or Colorado or someplace, and they're going to repossess something from him. I'm sitting here saying, well, why don't you let them repossess it? Tell them to get the damn thing out of there. That's the yoke that's around your neck, partner. Oh, well, gosh, if I did that, then I wouldn't make the profit off of it. What he's saying is, well, gosh, it's so comfortable here in Egypt being a slave. I want to be free, but gosh, my taskmaster over here is making me go out and gather straw to make the brick. If he would just reduce the burden on me, I'd happily make his brick, and I'd be happy as his slave. But he's just a bad taskmaster, and what I want you, Mr. Gordon, I want you to be my new master. What I want to do is teach you how to be free. And there's about 1 or 2% of you people out there that want to be free and can carry it out and exercise it. And those of you who want to be free can be free in the morning, or as soon as you can pay off the obligation. As soon as you can get off of food stamps and welfare, you can be free. And as soon as you get out from underneath that soil bank and pay off the mortgage to the bank, and etc., you can be free. As soon as you get out of the banking system and claim your labor as property, instead of converting your labor, which is property, to a chosen action and obligating yourself to the income tax, you can have the fruits of your labor. You've been cunningly coerced into waiving your rights, so says U.S. versus Minker, I believe it is. All right, so let's see what we've run through here while I wrap this one up. Money. It's a big subject. The whole root cause of mankind's problems and our problems, particularly here in the United States, revert back to money. HJR 192, gold and silver, chose as an action, legal tender, lawful money, these terms that you'll find in the dictionary. You need to master those terms, by the way, and as I've said, you need to know about 100 words in law, and these are some of the words in this lesson that you need to know and understand. Once you know and understand those terms, then when you walk in on that courtroom floor, you can better articulate your position. If you're just going to argue Article 1, Section 10, you're kind of out to lunch. But if you can argue the definitions and that Article 1, Section 10 is the foundation upon which you're building your defense, then you can successfully argue money in the courtroom. And there's a whole lot more to this thing of law than just sex in marriage. You know, it isn't just how do I stop paying the income tax, it's how do I defend a parking ticket. You know, can the court enforce a judgment against me? Can I become judgment-proof? How do I protect my income? Yeah, that's very important, and I don't blame you for that. I'd want to protect my labors also, but also its specific performance and obligations, isn't it? So, based upon this lesson now, going back to 1933, take a look at the books and the material that you've got and see if you can understand the subject matter of money. And that subject matter of money will be the foundation. It's the beginning point in getting yourself free from your government and giving you an opportunity, then giving you the ammunition that you need to slay the Anakims and the Girgashites.